Hello, I'm Anastasia Lavrina and welcome to Inside Politics. Today we are diving into a very important topic that could change the future of the South Caucasus, the growing partnership between Azerbaijan and Georgia. But what's really driving these alliances and what's at stake for everyone involved? In a world where things are changing quickly, the partnership Azerbaijan and Georgia is becoming even more important. Recently, Sahiba Gafarova, the Speaker of Azerbaijan's parliament, met with Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze. Both countries are clearly focused on strengthening ties, especially in politics, business, and energy fields. Now, let's talk about something even bigger. Azerbaijan's Foreign Minister Ceyhun Bayramov recently visited Kazakhstan to discuss many issues, among which is the Middle Corridor. Known as the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, is a trade route that cuts through China, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey, and eventually reaches Europe. It only takes 15 days to get from east to west. So why does this matter? This route could change the way global trade works. It's faster, more reliable, and it might just shake up how goods are moved across the world. Yes, there are challenges with infrastructure, but the Middle Corridor could be a game changer for the future of a trade. More on this issue right now. Joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Glenn Howard, President and Chairman, Saratoga Foundation. Mr. Howard, warm welcome to Inside Politics.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So our key issue to talk today is the Middle Corridor. But despite the fact that I started with the strengthening of bilateral cooperation between Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, I would like to start my first question to you with trilateral cooperation between these three countries, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and Georgia, and their willingness to unite the efforts to work even closely for more efficient use of the Middle Corridor. How do you see this process? What are the expectations and the possibilities on the ground?
Well, I think that the regional cooperation between the Caspian country states in Central Asia and the Caucasus are increasing. And I think it's very encouraging that Turkmenistan has indicated that it wants to join the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route that goes through the region. But of course, the big player in all this is China. And China is going to be the heavy user of this corridor. And so China has been increasing its railroad connections and transport links with Central Asia at a time when its ties with Russia are not improving in terms of transport links. And now there's been reports that China is going to bypass Russia because of the problems that they're having with that corridor. So that's good news for the Middle Corridor because China is playing a big role. And it's also good news that Turkmenistan's getting ready to play a role and widen it. So the meeting that was just held involving Georgia is a key indicator that Georgia is becoming a key part of this Middle Corridor hub. As you see the Zangezur Corridor also starting to develop. You've seen the export, the connections of gas between Turkey and Nakhchivan. And now that Turkey and Nakhchivan through Azerbaijan are establishing closer connections and connectivity in the Zangezur Corridor. So you're starting to see in the region a growing kind of interconnection in the various trade routes, and that's very encouraging.
So, Mr. Howard, if I do understand you correctly, there is a huge potential for Zangezur Corridor for our viewers to know to connect Azerbaijan with its part Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic through the territory of modern Armenia. There is a real possibility of that part to become a part of the Middle Corridor in the future, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you see the incremental steps that Turkey and Azerbaijan are taking through cooperating with in the Nakhchivan region of Azerbaijan. You see the railroad connection, the railroad that Turkey is upgrading and investing in to connect to Nakhchivan. Now you see the gas transportation links Nakhchivan no longer has to depend on gas from Iran. So that's very encouraging. And so the whole region is moving in that positive direction. And now you have President Trump sending a letter to Khamenei of Iran proposing peace, trying to improve relations with Iran. So that will also benefit the Zangezur corridor, the middle corridor, because if Iran eventually improves relations with the United States, then you're going to see a further increase in regional trade flows.
But do you think that Iran may decide to contribute somehow to the future operation of the middle corridor, or probably Iran may come up with its own proposals?
Well, I'm sure certain Iran wants to use its port access through the Persian Gulf to attract countries from Central Asia to transport their goods through that region, and also encourage Azerbaijan to improve those ties. But the entire middle corridor is not just in one direction; it's unidirectional. But the key thing is it's going east and west. So of course, Russia and Iran will want to play a role with it, but the trade flow is definitely east-west. And so, and Zangezur is a very big key part of that, and peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan are a very important part of that process. So, with improving relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan and the prospects of peace in Karabakh through the normalization of relations with Armenia, then the prospects for this region are dramatically improving. And I would say one other thing too. Now, the trade flows between all the global trade flows around the world are being reshaped by the United States. And so what we're seeing, not just with Middle Corridor, but we're also seeing something called the India-Middle East Corridor that is being developed as well. And there's competing corridors that are emerging. And President Trump, just I guess a day or two ago, posted a comment about the IMEC, the India Middle East Corridor, to his Truth Social account. So that means that President Trump is actually thinking about trade corridors. Now, it's not good news for Azerbaijan, of course, because Azerbaijan is not a part of the India Middle East Corridor. But the idea here is that there's these new corridors emerging in the United States, and the President of the United States is starting to recognize that and value their importance. So hopefully at some point, once there's peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia, that the Zangezur corridor will become equally important as well in U.S. strategy.
You rightly mentioned that Donald Trump is about to have this direct communication with Iran after his statements on that matter. So does it mean that Donald Trump has an intention to increase the presence of the United States in our region? Because Iran is also a part of the Caspian Sea. It's also probably part of many new transport communications. It's a north-south. It's a possible platform, discussions and dialogues to be held between the countries which is geographically located in this region. So if Donald Trump has an intention to have a direct talk with Iran, does it mean that the United States has more willingness to increase its presence here?
Well, I would say that's an immediate go. It's not, it's something that's on the horizon, because you got to understand the Trump administration has only been in office. It's not even 90 days. I mean, it's basically been 30 days plus 10. So it doesn't have a strategy or focus yet, because the focus is on Canada and Mexico. But my point is that eventually, at some point, the United States is going to redirect its interest, and it's obvious that the United States is trying to come to an agreement with Ukraine on our minerals agreement on critical minerals and rare earth. And the United States wants to take a direct economic investment in Ukraine. And so this is your neighborhood. So it's not Zangezur, it's not Middle Corridor, but it's your neighborhood. And so the President of the United States has indicated that he has a strategic interest in Ukraine and in Ukrainian minerals. He's also talking about Russia and developing agreements with Russia and resuming American investments. And a lot depends on the Ukraine war. So the point here is that the United States and the Trump administration are thinking economically, and they're also thinking in terms of peace. And so this is going to affect the trade patterns because you have a United States government that's thinking about trade and economic investment. And most importantly, it's thinking about critical rare earth minerals and what it can have established in terms of relations with your part of the world, Central Asia, the Caucasus and Caspian region. Azerbaijan is at the center of that. So the United States is thinking about that. But eventually, and if we give them maybe 6 months or a year, they'll be there. But it's just going to be very slow at the beginning because they're trying to work on other higher priorities. So, but Azerbaijan is really at the middle of everything, of the middle corridor. And the more they move, improve relations with Armenia, and Turkey is playing a critical role in this. And there's rumors that President Trump may actually visit Turkey soon, sometimes this year. That's what some of the rumors are. He's certainly going to Poland in April. So that's very important. He's showing an interest in your part of the world, even though it's not right directly in Baku. So.
Yes, well, indeed, Donald Trump has quite pragmatic vision of the future geopolitical and economic changes. But you rightly mentioned, since the start of the war in Ukraine, the country started to look for new opportunities. That's why new transport and energy routes attracted even more attention. And now with that new Trump tariffs plan, which will definitely affect the European Union countries, the Europe is also looking for an alternative. So probably that's one of the issues, one of the explanations why Commissioner for International Partnership in the European Commission is set to visit Central Asia to advance the development of the Middle Corridor.
Yes, that's true. I mean, in the United States, in the Trump administration, looks upon Europe as a trade rival. So Europe, not the European people, are rivals, but the European Union as an economic bloc is a rival. So for your purposes and people in Azerbaijan, it's very important to know that President Trump thinks in terms of geoeconomics. He looks at trade blocs. And so what we have emerging in Central Asia and the Caspian region is the organization of Turkic states. You have the Middle Corridor developing, and he thinks in terms of trade flows and what is in the interest of the United States to try to develop relations with this important part of the world. So, to your point, I mean, it's very important that the United States, definitely the European Union looks upon Azerbaijan and Turkey as very important regions that it wants to develop relations with. And so they're obviously trying to develop and influence trade flows that benefit them. And so the United States at some point is going to look upon a free trade agreement with Turkey would be hugely beneficial to Turkey and your region, because it further integrates the United States economically into the Turkish economy if they go that route. Now, also with Ukraine, if there's a ceasefire and the mineral agreement is in effect, then you're going to see increased American economic interest and American businesses on the ground inside of Ukraine. Now, why is this important to Azerbaijan? Now, this is important to Azerbaijan because if there is a ceasefire in the war, then you would see Turkey suspend Article 19 of the Montreux Convention, which means that the Black Sea would open up again to commercial traffic, also to American and Royal Navy warships, and the Russians would return. So what it means in a ceasefire environment is the Black Sea suddenly becomes economically very important to the United States again, also to the Europeans. And so we need to take that into consideration when we're thinking about the Middle Corridor, because the United States, well, now its position in Ukraine will be much different, and in Russia if there's a ceasefire. And so we need to think geopolitically about what type of impact that will have on the Middle Corridor and on Zangezur.
You mentioned Organization of Turkic States, and that's quite interesting because talking about Turkmenistan and its willingness to transport its gas to Europe through Iran or through Azerbaijan to be part of the Southern Gas Corridor, the issue which has been discussed is potential within years, and now there is a real possibility to have it on the ground. So in that part, we also spoke about the Organization of Turkic States, the governments who are willing to work even more closer in these particular directions. And today, talking about the middle corridor, we can see that there is a potential where Organization of Turkic States become a significant part of these global projects. So what do you think about this particular issue? And probably there is a potential for new members to join the initiatives within the middle corridor.
Well, that's why I was emphasizing the role of trade blocs. And so, for the first time, you have 5 Central Asian countries plus Azerbaijan joining into that and to create an economic and a political grouping that you could say that it's similar to the European Union. In other words, the countries of the region are uniting themselves to develop trade and political relations as a bloc, and Turkey is involved in it as well because they're the leader in this area. And so this is the first time that you're now starting to see the formation of a potential rival bloc to the European Union made up of the countries of Central Asia plus Azerbaijan, and now you have Georgia and the Caucasus. But you're starting to see the Organization of Turkic States kind of evolve, and organizations are now evolving in the same way that the European Union began as a very small trade entity in the late 1940s, led by France and Belgium and Germany. And now you're starting to see Central Asia with Azerbaijan and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan becoming the regional leaders in trying to develop their own type of counter bloc themselves. They're cooperating among themselves. You're organizing, you're discussing in a very friendly manner visions and plans for the future. And that's very important as a region that you're all coming together to do this. And it certainly helps that China is in the background trying to say, well, we would like to be a part of our trade. We want our trade to go through your countries. And so it's becoming a unifying force, kind of integrating the region together. And that's very important because, I mean, now we're, 3 decades of independence since the collapse of the Soviet Union. So now you're becoming more in a unifying mode, and that's very, very important.
That's indeed very interesting, especially because of using these new terms. When people are speaking, the experts are speaking about the Organization of Turkic States, they're also calling it as a trade bloc for the future and energy union, which will definitely have its own place on the global market. And one more question about what we start with. Azerbaijan and Georgia, 2 countries in the South Caucasus, interconnected with many projects, starting from energy, coming back to the political communications and support within the international organizations. How do you think 2 states do have the potential to even enforce the level of cooperation? How the recent changes in the geopolitical structure of Georgia may affect these processes, especially in its future cooperation with Europe or maybe with the United States?
Well, you're asking, the larger geopolitical question is that Russia is preoccupied by the war in Ukraine. So Russia's presence in the South Caucasus has diminished, and its ties with Armenia are quite bad right now. Even Russia's relations with Azerbaijan are not very good at all because of the unfortunate downing of the Azal airline. Now, what's happening is that Turkey and Azerbaijan together are the regional leaders. And Azerbaijan is emerging as a regional power in the Caspian region. President Aliyev has been he's been very vocal about traveling to Kazakhstan, improving relations with Uzbekistan. Azerbaijan is becoming a leader and has a vision for the region, and it's using all the economic power that it's accumulated over the years from its oil and gas investments, and it's using that money and investments and its improved regional position to be a leader in Georgia. So basically Georgia is a very important geopolitically, and it's very weak geopolitically. But Azerbaijan is trying to make sure that Georgia doesn't become a liability to its regional policies. That's why Azerbaijan has been very significantly becoming a champion of Georgia, trying to help Georgia through this difficult time that it's experiencing internally, to try to become a regional leader. And even Azerbaijan is becoming a regional leader in the North Caucasus. Its economic influence is expanding. And so this is in combination with its partner in Turkey. So it's basically two pieces coming together in the region. And so even Armenia is talking differently. President Pashinyan is speaking and saying things differently about how it views its relations with Turkey. So I mean, I would say the tectonic plates of the Caucasus are moving and shifting, and it's very important to know that. And right at the center of it is Azerbaijan and its kind of multi-directional role that it's playing between east and west, north and south. And so so it's basically using all this investment that you've accumulated in the past 2 decades with the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline, the gas pipeline project, Nabucco, the other things that are going on in the region. You've increased your connectivity with the rest of the world, and that's very encouraging.
Sounds indeed very interesting. So, sir, thank you so much for joining our program today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I would like to remind that today with us we had Glenn Howard, President and Chairman of Saratoga Foundation, who joined us from Washington, D.C., United States of America. Dear viewers, thank you so much for being with us. Do stay with A News and see you soon.